Hello, and welcome to our Facebook Live talk on IBD and relationships. Thanks so much for joining us here. And again, just a note, as we are going through the video tonight, the comment section just below or beside the video that you're watching right now, please feel free to ask any questions you may have about IBD and relationships, as well share any experiences that you may have had throughout your time living with IBD and having to deal with relationships, both at work, at home, romantic relationships, however much detail you want to give, that's up to you. Thanks again to AbbVie for making our education events this month possible. We do have a number, in addition to the Facebook Live event tonight happening this month. On Thursday, October 13th, we're going to be hosting a webinar on More Than a Bathroom Disease, talking about all the facets of IBD. Again, that's at 7 o'clock Eastern. On Thursday, October 20th at 7, The Future of IBD Treatments, another webinar for you to join. And on Thursday, October 27th, we'll be looking again More Than a Bathroom Disease, the webinar, but that version in French. So for all the details and to sign up for those webinars, just head over to our website, crohnsandcolitis.ca. My name is Rashid Clark. I work with Crohn's and Colitis Canada. I'm also a volunteer, and I suppose I'm also a client because I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in 2008. I had my colon removed in 2013. I now live with a pelvic pouch. And we are talking today with Jenna Rhymes, 2013 AbbVie IBD Scholarship recipient, also a volunteer with us at Crohn's and Colitis Canada. So Jenna, thank you so much for being here with us, and maybe a little bit more about you for everyone watching.
Sure. So I was diagnosed with colitis in 2010. I had surgery, total colectomy, so removed my colon, and I had an ileostomy for about 3 years. Then I was re-diagnosed with Crohn's, so I was on a couple of different biologics, and then they reversed my ileostomy, and now I'm living free of medication. So they're not really sure what my diagnosis is right now, but yeah.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
All right. And again, just a note for everyone watching, if you want to ask your questions or just share your stories about IBD and relationships, just pop them into the comments thread right now, and we'll get to as many questions and experiences, stories as we can throughout the night. And we'll throw open the questions, first of all, just to you, Jenna. When you were first diagnosed, was it hard for you to talk about the illness with friends, family, coworkers, whoever?
Definitely. The whole process of getting diagnosed, I know was really difficult, and I wasn't sure how much to disclose to people because a lot of it was me trying to figure out what was going on with myself, let alone, I'm not sure what to tell other people. Like, I'm having these really weird symptoms that aren't normal. So it was a lot of trying to figure out really what to share with people. So I know my family, my partner at the time, who I'm still with right now, but I shared a lot with them, and that was a lot of ups and downs, going through that process. But definitely it was a challenge.
Okay. And so at the time that you were diagnosed, who were the main support systems that you had around you?
So I was in university at the time, my second year, so I was living with a group of people in a big house. So they were some of the people who I did disclose some details to because in proximity we were all living together. Yeah. Certainly they didn't get the whole picture just because of the sensitive nature of what was going on. But my parents, my family, my sister, and my partner at the time were the ones who kind of got the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how much did you tell them about the illness? I mean, I understand the roommates maybe just kind of a basic level, here's the situation, but for the friends and family, were you able to give them more details, more specifics about, or how,
yeah.
What were you comfortable disclosing to them?
For sure. At the beginning, not a lot.
Okay.
It's really hard to talk about, diarrhea,
Yeah.
your bowel movements, lots of blood.
Yeah.
At the same time, I didn't, my parents did live overseas at the time, so it was hard to kind of tell them, I'm going through a lot of these really serious things and didn't want to worry them at the same time. So it was finding a balance of that, but for sure I was, as I was getting more comfortable talking about my symptoms, I was giving them more and more information, but at the beginning it was not a lot of information.
Yeah, I think I had the same experience when I was first diagnosed and telling my family, maybe my very closest friends, just here's kind of what I have to deal with, and I gave them more of a specific description of the internal situation.
Right,
Like it's an
yeah.
autoimmune disease.
Definitely.
My body's attacking itself. That's why I have to go to the bathroom more. And I tried to spare them some of the details on, like you said, blood, like diarrhea.
Totally.
If anything, I maybe did point out that I do have to use the bathroom, 20, 25, 30 times a day when things are at its worst. And I think just as a way of letting them know there was a reason I'm in the bathroom
Exactly.
that often.
Exactly.
I'm not just going in there to kill time. Like the
Totally.
reason I'm going so often is because I have to.
Totally.
And I think that's obviously one of the hallmarks of the disease, so it's important that people know that.
100%. Yeah.
And over time, have the support systems changed at all between, obviously, boyfriend's still there, family's still there, I hope. So like friends, family, has any of those support systems changed over the years?
The core has stayed the same. My parents, I'm still very, close with my parents, still very close with my sister, my partner. I find kind of the friends around me changed a little bit depending on the situation, because I know I had quite a large group of friends, but as I kind of told them more and more, as I kind of withdrew a little bit because of the disease, some people did tend to drop off a little bit, so I know that's kind of changed. But a core group of friends has stuck with me, so that's good.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so now just turning to some of the questions that we're getting on our Facebook Live video. Again, if you have questions or just want to share your story, just pop everything into the comments thread. So one question, how do you feel about others in your family talking about your illness? Someone who has a son with UC sometimes thinks that, other people in the family maybe shouldn't be privy to that information without him knowing. So any advice dealing with, maybe advice as well dealing with someone who's a minor, maybe someone who, maybe doesn't want all that information disclosed?
Definitely.
Or any thoughts just as well about other family members talking about the illness?
Definitely. Because I was diagnosed at a later age, I can't necessarily speak to the minor aspect of that, but in terms of my family, I know I have quite a large extended family, and it was at times hard to control kind of who talks to who and what information gets passed on, and at times I know I was quite frustrated, especially towards the beginning of my diagnosis, because I didn't have a lot of control over who was knowing what, based on, I'd tell my mom one thing, I'd tell my grandparents one thing, and then it would kind of explode from there, and then I'd be hearing, other things from other people, and how did you know that? So that was a little frustrating. It was, it was hard to control, which was frustrating.
Yeah. And same situation for me. I was diagnosed early 20s, like a lot of us have been. But dealing with a minor, I think that's really up to the parents' discretion to just decide how much information should be shared with the rest of the family.
Totally.
And maybe when that child gets older, he or she will be more comfortable talking about it themselves. And then at that point, you can kind of maybe throw things open a little bit more. But when a parent's there and you have a minor, I think it's up to the parent to decide just how much information to sort of let out to the family.
Definitely.
I think some of it's obviously important because you want family members to know just what's happening with your child, but you don't have to share any more information than you feel is necessary.
Definitely. And it speaks to your support network as well, I think, right? Because if sharing those details is going to help give you support and kind of help other people understand what you're going through and what maybe your son is going through, definitely that's going to be a big thing.
Exactly.
But at the same time, sometimes you don't have a lot of control of who says what sometimes, so it's...
And I guess just on that topic, when we're talking about family members being involved, have you stayed in constant communication with your family, like through ups and downs, or is it only when things are kind of unstable that you need to let them know, hey, I'm having a rough time right now, and so here's what I need?
Right.
Or do you tell them, hey, I'm good today?
Yeah.
So just
no, it's a good question.
Everything's cool.
That's a good question. During university, typically you're not in contact with your parents all that often. I know as soon as I got sick, definitely it was a big worry. It was the biggest thing that's happened in our family for sure. So after that, I know my parents and my family in general wanted to keep in very close contact, and I did as well, just for my sake. And kind of since then, it's been a fairly constant, communication. Definitely during times when I'm, sick or flaring or something very serious is going on, we are talking, a lot more than usual. But I think honestly, the the experience has really strengthened our relationship, and we do talk probably a lot more than we would have if I hadn't have gotten sick in the first place. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And some other comments coming through on the Facebook Live, again, sort of speaking to the issue of a minor who has Crohn's or colitis. Someone saying that they didn't mind when their parents shared sometimes information, but it can be exhausting to always deal with family members asking about it every time you see them. So, you may go a few weeks or months without seeing some particular relatives, and then when you see them again, you have to go over the whole spiel one more time, saying like, okay, here's my condition and things are okay. And I mean, does that ever get tiring? Does that weigh on you after a while?
It does. It actually just happened over Thanksgiving, because I saw once, my two sides of my family, and the one side is quite large, so it aunts and uncles and all the relatives, they can ask you lots of repetitive questions, right, over and over again, and it definitely comes from a place of concern, but for sure it weighs on you, and especially when you're in a good place or you're feeling really good, you don't always want to dwell on what you can or can't eat over the weekend, or negative things. You kind of just want to celebrate the positives and how you're feeling, but I mean, it definitely comes from a place of concern.
So now moving maybe a little bit away from family to just other relationships, general people that you meet, friends in your life, has it become easier to talk to people about your condition over time, or like how did you first get into talking about it with your friends, people who weren't necessarily relatives?
Definitely the roommate thing. Why I'm using the bathroom 20, 30 times a day, it kind of came out as a necessity in that sense, because they knew I looked visibly ill, right? I was pale, I was, lost so much weight, so definitely I had to say something about that. At first it was because you don't really know your diagnosis. You know that you have this diagnosis, but you don't necessarily know the best way to communicate it to people. You don't maybe want to start with like, I have lots of diarrhea all the time, or lots of blood, because it might, scare some people away. There's definitely that stigma still. So you might, start off, I learned over time, you might start with, oh, I have Crohn's disease. Oh, what's that? So kind of gauging what they know about it. So that's definitely come with years of talking to people about the diagnosis. In terms of being able to tell strangers,
or at least new people.
New people,
you don't necessarily have to stop someone on the street and say, "Hey, let me tell you about my Crohn's."
Let me tell you. It's come with practice. I mean, the more I volunteered, the more I got involved with the different Crohn's and colitis, or even invisible disability organizations that I've become involved in. You kind of learn that lingo a little bit. You learn to feel more comfortable with telling people about it. But it's tough at the beginning for sure. So I would definitely just be comfortable with the language yourself before you start talking to other people about it.
I think one thing that's helped me in describing colitis and everything else about inflammatory bowel disease when I meet someone for the first time, or when I'm just getting to know someone, is to maybe, rather than starting off with the symptoms, start off with the reasons that lead to the symptoms.
Definitely.
Like if you mentioned inflammation, autoimmune disease, we're still kind of unsure as to what causes. Well, we are unsure as to what causes the disease. I think that's kind of a good way to ease into the conversation rather than bloody diarrhea. Right off the bat. So I mean, something like that to get people aware of the science behind it,
Definitely.
at least the known science behind it. I think that's kind of a good way to ease people into it. Because at the end of the day, you want people to understand.
Exactly.
You don't want people to just know that you're using the bathroom more, or that you're dealing with gas or cramps or whatever it is. You want people to actually understand the disease itself.
For multiple different reasons. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think to touch on the autoimmune thing, I mean, there's so many different autoimmune diseases, right, and different conditions. So I think once you say the word autoimmune, so many people, like, you see people's faces light up going, oh, I know what that means. Like, I have this condition, or I have a friend who has this condition. So definitely, I think that's helpful.
And again, just a reminder to everyone watching, just any comments or questions you may have, if you want to share some experiences about how Crohn's or colitis has affected your relationships, just please write it into the comments section, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. And on that note, a note from Amanda, who's a mom of 2 kids who works full-time. There are days that are harder than others. My advice is to just take each day as it comes. There are great days, and then there are bad days. Live each day to the fullest. And Amanda was 13 when she was diagnosed and didn't become open until she was 18 about living with Crohn's. so again, with a lot of people, I mean, that comfort level I think builds up over time, and certainly when you're dealing with it through your teenage years,
100%,
that's an awkward phase for a number of reasons, not just because of Crohn's and colitis. So maybe when you get a better sense of self, it's a little bit easier to open up to people. And something we did touch on in the last question was how important is it to tell people right off the bat that you have Crohn's or colitis, or is that something you just kind of keep in your back pocket? Because there may not be like a right moment, but do you maybe wait a little bit, or just let them know right off the beginning?
It depends on who it is. I know with coworkers, it's definitely been, kind of wait and see, definitely want to get to know you a little bit better, especially if it's like new friends, new coworkers. I know I have disclosed to most of my coworkers now, so that's, it's been an interesting conversation. It's been kind of one-on-one, not kind of in a group and saying, hey guys, I have inflammatory bowel disease. It's kind of a one-on-one conversation, but I find that it's actually strengthened a lot of relationships that I've had with people. That's what was the second part of the question?
Well, just that. What was the question?
It was.
Oh, how important is it to tell people right away?
Right. Yeah. So okay. So going back to kind of university time, certain people it kind of does make sense to tell right away. For example, professors and things like that. I know I made the mistake of not telling my professors right away, and I actually. There were a couple of instances where I wasn't able to make up a test, and then had to have like a 75% final or something like that. It makes a lot more sense for that to disclose right away, especially to accessibility services or disability services. In those cases, you might not even have to tell your professor, but definitely to disclose, to try to get as much services and resources that you can at the beginning.
So shifting more so to like the work environment.
Right.
A question from Shabina. Any experience regarding taking time off and bosses' understanding? So obviously you get maybe a new job, or you've had a job for a while and you get your diagnosis. How much information do you tell your boss, and have you run into any problems actually asking for time off if you needed it?
Right. Personally, I have not had that issue, fortunately. Definitely it's a concern because the workplace, you don't feel like you need to disclose a lot of those things. It's a very personal thing. It really depends on your relationship with your supervisor, I think, or your boss. I have a really positive relationship with my supervisor, fortunately, but I know that it's something that you really do have to feel comfortable with yourself. And just kind of get a sense, maybe if you have a close coworker, see what they would think in terms of, approaching your manager, your supervisor.
Yeah, I think obviously now working for the organization as I do, I'm pretty fortunate that everyone kind of understands the conditions here. In past jobs, though, I think I did let people know kind of at the outset about the condition. And I think largely because, like you, I was a volunteer for a long time, and I had that on my resume. So it kind of comes up naturally. But I mean, for other people, there's no reason that they have to disclose that at any point during the interview process. And that's something that you can just bring up when you're comfortable with it. I think a lot of workplaces, have to make the accommodations when necessary. I mean, that is your right. When you're working, you need time off for medical reasons. So, I mean, luckily, I think you and I have had pretty good experiences. Maybe some other people, not so much.
But definitely get, if you have a positive relationship with your GI or your family doctor, definitely get them on your side and, ask them to write you a note or any kind of support. I know my GI once didn't even write that I had Crohn's on it. He just said, Jenna needs to take time off for medical purposes. Please allow this accommodation. And I know it was accommodated, so definitely kind of gauge your comfort level and try to work around that.
Sure. And a comment here from Tammy. I'm always upfront. I don't want anyone making assumptions that I'm faking being sick or abusing sick time at work. I'm really good at not looking sick, as we all are. Yes, we're very good at that.
Yeah.
And when people don't know, they can assume, or when people don't know, they assume, which can lead to problems.
Totally.
So again, another good reason to disclose that information to coworkers and to your employer when you're comfortable, so that if you do take time off, you don't have people sort of gossiping and making assumptions as to why you're taking the time off. Because obviously you have legitimate reasons,
Yeah.
but if they don't know, their mind can start wandering to
Yeah.
very untruthful places,
Yeah.
shall we say.
Yeah, for sure.
So maybe moving on a little bit to romantic relationships, fun stuff. Now, did you find it hard to bring up the diagnosis or any information about Crohn's or colitis with your partner at the time, and even
Well,
right up till now?
yeah. Fortunately, when I was diagnosed, I was already 2 years into my relationship, so I've been with my partner for a long time. So it's been I've been very fortunate. He's been very understanding of when I was first diagnosed, and very extremely supportive. So I was very lucky in that sense. I know other people have a much harder time. Because a lot of people, especially when you're diagnosed in your early 20s, you're starting dating, you're meeting people, so really it's a hard time to be diagnosed. But with my relationship, I found just being upfront, letting him know what I was going through really did save a lot, in terms of, because we lived in separate cities, so he was having to travel back and forth to visit me, and me to him as well. So I know giving him those details up front really did helped our relationship, I think, and helped develop it more.
So I think from my perspective, I was single when I was diagnosed.
Okay.
I think one of the concerns I had was now I'm going to be single forever because of the disease.
Right.
But I mean, I was generally a little bit more hesitant to tell people about it. I think soon after my diagnosis, when I was in remission
Right.
and seeing someone, I really didn't mention any of it.
Yeah.
And turns out I didn't need to, because that relationship went sour pretty
Right.
quickly.
Oh.
But that's another story. Another story. But I felt that there was no need to mention it, especially when you're in remission, because you feel
Right.
very much normal.
Totally.
I think one of the dangers, though, in that is that when it comes time to describe the problem, it's when you're in a flare.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a good thing to mention to people early,
Yeah.
where you can and where you're
Yeah.
comfortable. And I think in other relationships that I've been in since then, people knew pretty much right off the bat, and that made things a lot easier when I did face kind of rocky times.
Totally.
So it's a good thing to tell people, and generally I've been pretty fortunate. I've never had someone just run away screaming and say like, oh, you have that? Well, I guess I can't be in this relationship
Well,
anymore.
that's what I was worried about when I was, disclosing to my partner. I was thinking like, oh, you have to have surgery now, you have to have an ostomy now. I was thinking like, okay, that's it, our relationship is over. But almost 9 years later, we're still together. So it's, I think, giving people the benefit of the doubt, right? But at the same time, making sure that you're comfortable with how much you're disclosing. Even if you don't say I have Crohn's or I have colitis, you could always say, I do have an autoimmune disease, or, something, I do have a condition that, doesn't allow me to do this, or, I don't feel that good today, or something like that.
I mean, I think that in a relationship, and if you have one form of IBD or another,
Yeah.
chances are that you might, or probably will at some point, have to back out of a date or back out of plans.
Of something,
I think
yeah.
those are kind of good opportunities, unfortunately, good opportunities to
Yeah.
let people know exactly why it's happening,
Definitely.
and give them a little bit more information that it's not just I don't feel up for it today, or I'm
Yeah.
not interested. It's I genuinely don't want to leave my bed
Yeah.
because I'm really tired, and the only time I leave my bed is to use the bathroom.
Totally.
So any advice for someone who may be scared or concerned about disclosing that information to a partner or a potential partner?
Advice. I really liked your point on getting to the more the sciencey aspect, right? Or,
Yeah.
or that this is what it means, and this is how it's working in my body. Not so much focusing on the the symptoms or not the side effects, the symptoms like the diarrhea, the blood, and things like that. Because definitely, if it's at the beginning of a relationship, that might be a little bit too much to disclose at the beginning.
Yeah, just a little.
Just a little bit. Making sure you have a good support network outside of that, because I know if you're avoiding or not disclosing to the person that you might be dating or at least seeing, making sure you're telling someone else then as well, and making sure that they know what's going on, because if, for example, if you went out for a date but you had a really rough night, like just making sure you have that support system, to back up, get back up on. What else? I've never really thought in that lens, because I've been very fortunate.
You've been lucky enough to have a partner who was just supportive at the outset, right?
Very fortunate.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think if you are scared or concerned about raising that issue with someone, I think, as we mentioned before, it's good to just talk about it in like sort of scientific terms to begin with, and just let people know, here's what's going on inside me, and this is why I might have to back out of a date, or this is why I might have to cancel plans. Completely now?
Oh, we are back.
Oh, we're back?
Connection is weak.
Got it.
I'm gonna try and switch it up.
Sorry for some technical difficulties. We'll pick up as soon as we can. Our apologies for some technical difficulties. I think we're back up and running now. Sorry about that, and hope that you stayed with us. And again, if you are just coming back to the broadcast or just joining us for the first time tonight, again, we're talking IBD and relationships, and any questions or experiences that you may have on the topic, please just throw them into the comments section, and we'll get to as many of them tonight as we can. And thanks again to the people who've already stated their experiences or asked some questions. Again, we appreciate all the feedback. What were we talking about now? Oh yes, so your partner, how has his support helped you in terms of the relationship, or just in terms of your dealing with the disease itself?
Definitely, just a lot of emotional support. I'm a person who definitely, needs a hug every once in a while, or just, needs a shoulder to cry on. I know he's always been there for me. It's also the physical help aspect. Like when I'm having a really bad day, not feeling well, he's definitely that. We do live together now, so he's that person who, I'm in bed and I'm like, go get me some tea. Like he'll do that for me. So it's fantastic. I've really invaluable to his support.
Yeah. And I guess from my perspective, I was in a relationship with someone who knew everything about IBD. She took it upon herself to actually learn a lot about it after we started going out, and I really appreciate all the effort that she put in. And she was there through surgeries, time when I had the ostomy, and different medications, different treatments, and so having that extra support was obviously very beneficial for me, knowing that someone was willing to accept all that came with being with me. And I know that, I'm not easy to get along with even without the colitis, so put that in as an extra dimension. I think that really speaks to to her character. And I think in general, a lot of us are worried that someone is just going to push away, but in general, I think from the experiences that we've had, we see that people are generally pretty accepting of it. I think you just have to let them know all that you're dealing with, and I guess maybe we're just optimistic here in humanity, and we're hoping that most people will be open about it and understanding, and I think they're here to support us as much as they can. So thank you. One comment here from Mary Jose. I think the challenge about disclosing early in a relationship or when first starting to date is when you can't hide your illness because of complications like fistulas and how that might affect physical intimacy. I guess that's when you'll know if it's the kind of relationship you want to invest in, and if you're able to be honest and explain what that might mean for you and to them, and if they're still interested in continuing to explore a relationship with you. So it's a good benchmark, I guess, for a lot of people. You may be able to weed out some of the bad relationships pretty early, I guess, if you do get that information off the bat to begin with. Not to get into too many intimate details, but I mean on the topic of dealing with say fistulas or living with an ostomy. I know that is certainly a concern for some people who have had surgery or who are about to go under operations. Any advice on the ostomy front or surgery front that you can speak to?
Yeah, I think I think a lot of it had to do with my comfort level as well. At the time going through it, I wasn't so comfortable with my body, so it was difficult for someone else, for me to feel that someone else would be comfortable about my body as well. So I think that, getting comfortable with that, and kind of exactly what you said, like having faith in humanity a little bit, right? People go through really, really hard times, and I think people are much more understanding than we might think they would be.
Absolutely. And I think we're a lot harder on ourselves in general, because again, I had an ostomy again for a while, and I think it was a bigger crutch for me than for my partner, because I just didn't like the way that I looked.
Exactly.
And at the same time, she was fine with it.
Yep.
And another friend of mine who also had an ostomy told me a great story of her boyfriend when he first saw her with the ostomy appliance. Said, "It's just something that's on you. It's not you."
Right.
And I think that's a great little story and a great line that I think a lot of us who have or have had an ostomy kind of tend to forget, because we're the ones that live with it, and obviously it's a little bit trickier, and we're the ones that have to see it every day. But I think in general, it's a bigger burden on the person who actually has the ostomy than the other person in their relationship. But if you're with a supportive partner, obviously that makes a huge difference. And a comment from Stephanie: "I would totally date another crony." Heart. Okay, and yes, very, very good. I think as far as like dating someone who has Crohn's or colitis, obviously you're going to be at a certain level of understanding with each other. So that helps to begin with. Not saying that we only have to date each other. I think we can expand a little bit more than that as well.
And just to touch on Mary, I think it was Mary Jose's point. It's also a good benchmark to get a sense of how other people, like friends, are going to react to the news as well, right? You kind of get a sense of who's going to be sticking around for you when you're in the hospital, or when you're going through all these treatments and illness. It's not just for partners. It's also like your friends who you work with, go to class, all those things. So definitely not just for partners. Yeah. Because you lose some friends, I think.
And we've been pretty positive in general so far, but I mean there is unfortunately a darker side to this equation. And a comment from Donna: "I lost my 17-year marriage because of being so sick with ulcerative colitis. He said he felt more like my caregiver than my husband, and I felt destroyed." So again, Donna, first of all, are so sorry to hear that, and I think we can both feel for you, and a lot of the other people watching tonight can obviously empathize with your situation. So I mean, when we are dealing with a long-term relationship, I mean, it wasn't just someone who just started dating. 17 years of marriage, that's a long time. And have you ever felt as though you were a burden on your partner or other people in your life?
100%. Especially it's not just the IBD. It's often the extra the appointments, the surgeries, even the mental health aspect, right? I know our appearances can change, just everything, a general loss of identity, right? In changing situations. So that's a lot for one person to take, and especially when you're in a relationship, they're living everything with you. So it's a hard time for everyone involved, no matter what your age is, right? If you have kids, if you're an adult and have kids of your own, it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously never been on the other side of this sort of relationship equation, but I mean, you can see sometimes in your partner or even family members that your condition is weighing on them, and that obviously hurts your psyche. It makes you feel like a burden. I mean, I've felt that way quite often myself, and I think that one way to maybe counteract it is just to show appreciation to your partner wherever possible. And again, to Donna, who brought up the comment, I'm obviously not suggesting she didn't do that, because I'm sure she did. But telling people that you are appreciative of their patience, appreciative of the time that they may drive you to appointments, or just understanding when plans get canceled.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it does get tough after a while for certain people, and you know, maybe in those situations, it is better that, you know, relationships don't carry on, because sometimes, you know, it's too hard for both people to keep going. But you know, if you are with someone who's, you know, generally being, you know, really positive in your life, I think just taking moments to show your appreciation and let them know that that you understand that it's weighing on them too.
Totally.
I think that's important as well, because, you know, from the caregiver perspective,
Yeah.
I think they just want to know that they're acknowledged and that they understand that we're aware that it's tough on them too.
100%.
So, as far as disclosing to partners, friends, family, has anyone ever treated you differently after you told them about the condition?
I don't think so. I can't think of, I mean, definitely, okay, no, that's not true. Definitely my parents. I mean, in general, no. But in general, they have much more concern for me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I know that before the general question was, you know, hey Jenna, how are you doing now? It's like, how are you doing? Like, it's a lot more heavily weighed, right? That, you know, if I have a bit of a cold, there's, you know, definitely a lot more concern than there would have been, you know, prior to the diagnosis. But in terms of like coworkers or friends, you know, maybe some little discomfort at the beginning when you're just telling them about, you know, generally about what Crohn's or colitis is. But overall, my relationships, I don't think have really changed at all.
I mean, I think if anything, just like you said, people want to almost overcompensate and be a little bit too polite,
right,
or too helpful,
right,
in a strange way, because then, again, because there is a little bit of a misconception about how the disease affects each person, there's a thought that, oh, you have this condition, tell me all the things I can do to help.
right.
And again, that's appreciated, of course, but at the same time, sometimes we're okay.
I'm okay.
Yeah, we're okay. Another, again, back to Mary Jose, a big challenge for folks who are single is how to even have the energy to date when you aren't in remission, and maybe aren't in remission for a long time. You still want to develop close relationships, but how do you balance getting enough sleep, looking after yourself, particularly when you're flaring, and dealing with symptoms from side effects, meds, while still getting out there and doing activities to meet new people? It's a lot, obviously. So, I mean, when you're feeling lethargic, when you're feeling fatigued, when you have maybe side effects from medications or other treatments, I mean, how do you bolster up the energy to actually put yourself out there?
It's tough. I mean, even speaking from someone in a relationship, you know, trying to maintain that and like, hey, let's go on a date. Let's do stuff working towards our relationship. It's tough, and it's hard to really muster that energy to work towards it. And I know there have been times where we've had something planned, like, okay, we haven't had a date in a really long time. We're gonna go on a date today, and no, that's not happening. So I hear you. It's tough.
And I mean, I think for single people looking to make those connections, I think you have to just kind of be opportunistic in that when you do have a good period, even if it's a short period, like go, like know that if you're in a flare up or if you're feeling fatigued, that's when not to push yourself.
Yeah.
But just keep in the back of your mind that when you are ready to go, that you make a little bit of an effort to get out there. I mean, maybe that's the best thing that we can do, because you don't want to sacrifice your health and make things worse by pushing yourself to,
That's for sure.
I don't know, go to a club until 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is that kids do these days to meet other people.
Or
I mean, we are on Facebook right now.
Yes.
And we do have the internet at our disposal.
Yes.
So I think, you know, that any sort of stigma that may have been around online dating, I think has sort of diminished over the years.
Yeah.
So I think that's an opportunity for a lot of people as well to make those connections
Definitely.
online, either romantic relationships or just friendships.
Oh,
You know, through, again, our Facebook and Twitter and Instagram accounts. Not that I'm promoting them, but if you want to follow us, go ahead. But I am. You know, those are good places to make connections with people, and you can do them from the comfort of your home.
Totally.
And again, just when the time comes when you're ready to get back out there, then maybe you can put in the effort to actually get back out.
Exactly. And I was going to say that as well. And how can you modify maybe dates to make it a bit more accessible or easier for you to kind of manage, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't go to the club till 2 o'clock in
Yes.
the morning, but maybe just do a quiet dinner, you know, a few blocks from, you know, or not a few blocks, but maybe like 1 or 2 subway stops from your house, right?
Yes.
Something a bit more manageable.
Or leave the club at 1:30.
Right.
Get that extra half hour of sleep in there. It'll make a world of difference. A comment here, again, from Shabina. When first diagnosed at 23, I educated myself and then helped educate everyone else around me to have a better understanding of what I had and what I was going through. My friends and family around me knew not to define me but what I had, by what I had, but who I was. So again, I think that's an important thing for a lot of us to keep in mind, is that this is a part of us, but it's not all us.
Yeah.
But I mean, on that topic, have you ever had anyone sort of look at you and say, well, you have this disease, therefore that is you?
Only with doctors. Never that I can think of with friends or family or people that I've disclosed to. Yeah, never.
Yeah.
And I think I can't stress this point enough. Like, definitely, it goes back to feeling comfortable with an ostomy, with your diagnosis. Just how you perceive yourself a lot of the time is how others are going to perceive you, right? Your comfort level with the discussion, your comfort level with you know, what you're talking about, definitely is going to impact how you explain to other people, right, and how they perceive you, right? So the more you're comfortable with it, the more other people might be comfortable with it.
And one more comment here from an Aaron. I think it's also great to show appreciation, again, for your partner or family or friend who's supporting you, but also to recognize how much of an inspiration you are to other people. So I guess in this context, when you're talking about either a romantic relationship or a familial relationship, you want to show your appreciation to someone for taking you to the doctor's appointments, understanding the mistakes, understanding the missed moments, but at the same time let them know that, you know, you are the reason why I can keep going. It's because of that. I think that certainly helps from the caregiver perspective to know that that they are appreciated and, in fact, kind of seen as an inspiration to keep going. So again, very good point, and thank you for that. So now, as far as dating or even just family, friends, going out to dinner, social gatherings, food potentially being an issue. So any advice on like maybe planning for those kind of outings and social gatherings?
Yeah, I think goes back to really be able to gauge your energy level, and really stop telling people, you know, hey, I'm not up for our huge plan for, you know, all you can eat sushi tonight.
Yes.
I'm, you know, I'm maybe feeling a bit more low key. Like, let's just go for something smaller, or you know, really having those conversations before the, you know, disclosing before you have those plans.
Yeah.
Maybe not the night before, but you know what I mean. Like being able to feel comfortable with letting them know I need to tone it down a little bit. I know sometimes if it is going to be, like, for example, Thanksgiving, or you're going to a big meal, some people do tend to plan ahead and eat something small, or something that they are able to eat, so that they can just, you know, at least be with their friends or their family, and still enjoy the moment, but not have to sacrifice, you know, their well-being or you know, what they're eating for you know, for symptoms potentially later. So.
And as far as like going to like maybe family gatherings, have you ever sort of told people ahead of time, here's what I'm sort of comfortable with, and here are the things that I'm not so cool with, and sort of give them a little bit of a heads up as to meal preparation or food to know as you're going to a social event?
Sometimes. It's kind of balancing that, oh, I don't want to make more work for people, but at the same time, you know, this is going to be good for me, so definitely figuring out whether you're comfortable with that. But sometimes, I mean, I know people even bring their own food to the place if they feel comfortable. I would definitely talk to whoever's hosting first to say, hey, you know, I'm having a bad week, and I bring my own food, and I'm sure it would be fine, but
I mean, I think that's the trade-off here, is that you're still trying to make an appearance there. You're not just, you know, skipping out on the event altogether, but you're letting them know, I just need a little bit of a tweaking to things in order to make it work.
Definitely.
And I know in some years past, I've been in touch with my relatives ahead of going to their place and let them know, you know, maybe spicy food, just kind of tone it down a little bit.
That's one,
as much as I like them, they don't like me. I think letting people know ahead of time if you do have any dietary restrictions, just for the sake of ease. And in general, I think people are pretty accommodating, especially if you are talking about family. I know that some of my aunts and uncles have been very welcoming and would keep a little bit of food sort of separately aside from me. It was not as enjoyable by the looks of it compared to everyone else, but at the end of the night I wasn't in pain and I wasn't in trouble, so obviously that helps a lot. From Tammy, lots of Imodium, LOL. We're not giving any medical advice here, so that's just something to keep in the back of your mind. And again, just a little tack on from Tammy. My family and close friends are always considerate of my eating habits and what I can or can't have, and make an effort to accommodate. So again, I think generally people are pretty willing to make those efforts because you're not asking that much, really, when you think about it. You're not saying, oh yeah, by the way, make a second turkey for me and a separate side of cranberry sauce or whatever it is. Just like little things that can help. And as you mentioned, even bringing your own meals, it's a possibility. It's a little trickier that way because you don't want to make it seem as though you're insulting the host.
Totally, which is why you definitely want to talk to them beforehand.
Yes, exactly.
Don't just show up with your own food and go, my food's better than your food.
Yeah, this is for me, no one else can have it. That's, again, just, I think communication is important here. You want to tell your family and friends, like, I'm not, this is nothing against your cooking or your culinary skills, I just kind of need this as a little bit different. And I mean, on that topic, a friend of mine was actually a bodybuilder. She was in bikini competitions, and quite often she didn't have Crohn's or colitis, but she would take her own meals to other people's houses because she had a very strict diet plan. So if if a bodybuilder can do it, and get away with it, I think we can too. we have a real, potentially even more legitimate reason to do it as well. And yeah, as far as the Imodium goes, again, just we'll leave that up to your discretion. We're not giving any medical advice here. Back to some of the other topics we were talking about a little bit on the more downside. As far as strains in relationships, have you found any relationships with your friends or family or coworkers? Have there been sort of strains as a result of living with IBD?
Oh, definitely. And I know even with my partner, there've definitely been ups and downs. I mean, he's been so understanding with the whole thing, but definitely when I'm in a point where I just want to sleep or I just don't want to talk to anyone, of course that's gonna impact other people, right? They're gonna maybe even take it personally, and so afterwards it's a lot about that communication, that explaining like, hey, I had a really bad day yesterday, let's talk about it. It definitely had nothing to do with you. It was how I was feeling. So definitely strains in all relationships, really, from time to time.
I think for me it was the missed moments or times where you have to back out of things because you're not really feeling up for it. And I mean, I guess this is my mistake, that sometimes for a while I would say, I'm coming, I'll be there. And in the back of my mind I always kind of knew this is probably not going to work out so well. And then I back out and that causes strain. But I mean, at the end of the day, you do have to take care of yourself first. And I think it's easier to mend a little bit of a rough spot in a relationship than to say push yourself, go to an event, maybe wind up in a flare-up, and then have to deal with that. So you have to look at the balance of what's easier to repair. And I think in general, a lot of relationship strains are a little bit easier to deal with than a full-fledged flare-up.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yep.
I've done that.
I think a lot of us have, unfortunately.
Did not work well.
And clarification from Erin on the inspiration part. What I meant is how people see us as an inspiration when we live life while still battling. So again, I think when we're doing well, I think other people, our caregivers, our friends, families, they can see us as a bit of an inspiration as well. So Erin, thanks for clarifying that. She said my interpretation was good too. So I'll take that as a point as well. Again, maybe ending on a little bit more of a positive note, any relationships strengthen as a result of telling people about IBD and telling people about your condition?
Yeah. I think in general, most of my relationships have been strengthened. People feel like it's a very personal, private thing to disclose to someone about your Crohn's or colitis. So I know it's been boosting to a lot of my relationships. In particular, I think with work relationships, some work, I work on a team, and I know some coworkers don't necessarily trust their coworkers to disclose something like that. Maybe at Crohn's and colitis you do, but not not in other workplaces. And I know that has boosted our relationships, and it's just meant that we're sharing other aspects of our lives and feeling more comfortable, working and together and things like that. So yeah, that's been my experience.
And I'm pretty lucky in that same way as well, that I think a lot of relationships have been strengthened as a result of dealing with the hardships of living with colitis myself, and the surgeries, the ostomy, other surgeries, other medications. I know that with my family there's a lot of understanding, a lot of compassion, and again, to that point about inspiration, I think a lot of people do generate a little bit of encouragement for me in seeing that I'm still able to live pretty well in spite of everything that's happened. So it's been strengthening a lot of relationships for me as well. Last point from Shabina. Unfortunately, Crohn's and colitis can be described as invisible diseases where we can look great on the outside but be feeling horrible inside. For me, I'm very open with everyone about my disease in hope for anyone to get checked if they also have symptoms and not to take the symptoms lightly. So again, a good point to mention that, again, we have 1 in 150 Canadians has Crohn's or colitis. So there may be someone that you know who may be having some problems, showing symptoms, and this is actually a good way of raising awareness, not just for the disease, people who have it, maybe people who are sort of dealing with it sort of creeping into their lives. And obviously, the more people are aware of the diseases, the easier it is to talk about it, the easier it is to deal with employers and schools and other relationships.
Yeah. And it's not even just Crohn's or colitis, right? It's other autoimmune diseases as well, right? It brings all of us a little bit closer together. So I think we find it's good to help support each other through everything that's going on.
Yes. So again, I think we're going to start to wrap up for the night. Great conversation, Jenna. 23 scholarship winner, volunteer with Crohn's and colitis, sharing their experiences online. The questions and comments that we had were great. Please feel free to keep some of those comments coming in to our thread as we wrap up the video tonight. And just a reminder, a little bit as we go through the rest of this month, a number of other education webinars are coming up. This Thursday at 7 o'clock Eastern, More Than a Bathroom Disease, a webinar on all the facets of IBD. On Thursday, October 20th, also at 7 o'clock, the future of IBD treatments. So we'll see what's coming down the pipeline in terms of medications. And on Thursday, October 27th, also at 7 o'clock, More Than a Bathroom Disease, the French webinar will be available. And more details on all of those are on our website, crohnsandcolitis.ca. So again, thank you so much for everyone who took part in the webinar tonight. Thanks to AbbVie as well for providing all the support to make these webinars and events possible throughout the month. And if you're observing Yom Kippur tomorrow, may you have an easy fast. Thank you again for everyone for tuning in, watching, commenting, and bye for now. Have a great night.